Boys and girls. Oh, there's Dozer. Dozer's still on the screen.
That's such a cute dog.
Yeah, that was my puppy. Yep, he was a pretty good dog. Just really, really gentle dog, you know.
That's one thing I love about going over to my son's house is all these, they have like 3 dogs, 2 of which I, knew when they were a puppy, and just getting them to grow, and they just jump on me and love to lick me and cuddle with me, and of course I have me scratch their ears and stuff. It's a great feeling to see somebody wagging their tail, or a dog wagging their tail when you come in.
Oh, let's see here. I know what I'll do. I'll take a screenshot of this. I got to get rid of PowerPoint. I don't understand why PowerPoint is such a dog. Probably because Microsoft wrote it to run on a Mac.
Yeah, and then it's had to backwards do it for an Apple.
And they did a shitty job of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really bad. Anyway, so
natural system.
So I linked about a couple things in the description. There's a site called the Sinister Porpoise. And Maddox, let me see here. Is that going to shut down? Oh, yeah, it's all better now. So basically, Maddox went after him last night because he did a comeback video on Maddox's code argument, right? His big, long code argument, which was pretty funny. The cursor's still slow. Damn. This is horrible. I don't understand. Powerful computer, doesn't have any problems until I fire up StreamYard and OBS. Then all of a sudden I got trouble. And I got a lot of trouble right now. Lots of trouble. Oh, let's see if I can find this.
Nobody knows the trouble you've seen.
Yeah. So anyway, Maddox is going on and on and on about this code thing. And then so atheist channels will do a comeback. They'll argue with them about whether or not it's a code. And yeah, it's a fucking code. Okay, just drop it. It is analogous to a code in so many different ways, and it's been considered a code in biology forever. And everybody calls it a code, and that's not the problem. That is not why we're arguing with Maddox. The reason we're arguing with Maddox is because molecular biology has nothing to do at all with my atheism, right? I was an atheist before I started, and I'm sure it doesn't have anything to do with yours or anybody else on this.
No, not at all.
Right. I mean, we didn't start reading molecular biology and say, oh, God can't exist because, it happened naturally. So
it was the absurdity that following through with Christian theology led me to that led me to just say, no, this is not the life path that one needs to take if they're wanting to live a reasonable life.
Yeah. So anyway, so it has nothing to do. So I started studying molecular biology because I love molecular biology. And one of the things that really bothered me about life, understanding life, is I could not believe that when I put a seed into the ground, sometimes it turned into a carrot and other times it turned into a beautiful flower, and unfolded. And I was like, how in the hell does that happen? And it's like, man, I'm really skeptical. I don't believe that this could have happened by natural causes, right? So I started investigating why it happens by natural causes. And then I came to basically I came to a clear understanding, because that's something that we can investigate and we can look at every day. Basically, we can do all kinds of experiments. We can do knockouts. We can cut these little embryos up and we can make changes in them. And we understand totally how that embryo, basically that zygote, develops into a fully formed organism. Now, that is the most miraculous thing in biology that we know of. Now, then we're looking at, okay, how did that seed come to be? How did the seed fall off another carrot plant and come to be that seed, right? And we can go back and we can plant carrots and we can look at that. And then we can go back and look at its grand carrot, and its great grand carrot. But at a certain point, we're looking back in history and we're trying to figure out things like how life came to be. Now, just because I don't know how life came to be doesn't mean I'm going to arrive at the conclusion that some kind of spirit thing in the sky that builds machines like human beings exists. I'm an atheist for other reasons, because I find that implausible. I find the whole God thing completely implausible. So when Maddox comes up with his 8-premise argument, who does that, by the way? It's like, okay, he's got this argument. He's got 8 premises. Premise 8, he embeds the conclusion in premise 8. And then premise 9 is God did it, or, some intelligence. Have you looked at his argument, Beamsy?
It's one of the biggest ones, because I tried to respond to him yesterday and I got about 40 minutes into it and it was just, oh God.
Yeah.
He's doing 3 things that really gruff me. The genetic code is a code. There's no doubt about it. But it's in the aspect of a mathematical code, not a language code. That's one of the griefs that I have. He also uses Herbert v. York as his he quote mines from him to basically say, "See, these guys say it," and then you read the rest of the paper. And it's
you gotta love quote mining. I tell you what, that makes me pound my head on the desk.
And then he says that the code is a literal code. And then
it's a literal.
And then you look at the definition of code. One of the definition of code is the genetic code. So he's basically saying the genetic code is literally the genetic code.
Yeah, literally. The thing is,
sorry, go ahead.
If he has to prefix it with literal, then he's trying to make a point outside of the argument, right? So he's trying to bleed his opinion into the argument. If you say something is literally this, you're trying to make a further point about it. And his point is what? That it's literally designed by an intelligence. I mean,
that's his conclusion from his 8 premises.
Right.
And that's why he tries to present it as a hypothetical situation. And then whenever you actually tear apart his conclusions, it's, you completely missed the purpose of it.
Yeah. Yep. So okay. So all codes require arbitrary values being assigned to representative impulses, signs, or symbols. So that whole point is fine. So that one premise stands, because there is an arbitrary assignment. And we know that
not in mathematics. That's the problem. When you're talking about mathematical codes, the symbols are not arbitrary.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, and in mathematics, no. But if we were to develop a code where me and Scott could talk and you wouldn't understand it, Scott and I would get together and agree on an arbitrary definition of that code, right? And we could pick anything from the set.
And that's where my biggest problem with, because he's trying to represent something that the information, the people who actually have studied this thing for years have said that it resembles a computer code in the mathematical sense, but it's not a code in the language sense.
Yeah, it doesn't resemble computer code very well for a lot of reasons. But it resembles, the kind of code that you'd use in Cub Scouts create a cipher. Like when I was in Cub Scouts, when I was a little boy, they taught us how to create codes. Like the letter A would be 5, and F would be 1, and F would be 6, or whatever. So they taught us how to make codes, right? That kind of a code. And of course, we know that humans do this sort of thing. So that's one understanding of what code is. So another understanding is, in the last 50 years, we have come to call what we do to computers code. And what we're really doing to computers is not code, it's instruction. We're instructing the computer to execute certain processes. In other words, we're telling our machine that we want it to do step A, step B, step C, right? And we call that
Sinister Porpoise in the side chat, so I went ahead and put out the link if you want to come in, Sinister or Porpoise.
Pop in.
Flipper, whatever,
So Beamsy, you went after John, and then John went after you, and then the night before last, I think, and now he went after Sinister Porpoise last night. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, I know. I tried to actually sit through it, but again, he was just using more ad hominems, and it was basically, there's no way I can sit through more of his garbage.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question from Immutable. Perhaps this is something I don't understand well. Couldn't we call anything a code as long as the rules are precise enough?
Exactly. And that's what biosemiotics is all about. So biosemiotics is, let me see if I can go to the next set of premises here. Biosemiotics is basically a relationship that's a triangle. So at the lower left end of the triangle, you have the sign or the symbol, right? And then moving over to the right, you have an interpreter, or you have something that interprets that sign. And then at the very top, or the apex of the triangle, you have the result of that interpretation. So that's in a nutshell, that's what biosemiotics is. It's that triangular relationship. On the lower left, you have a bear track. On the lower right, you have a person, basically Daniel Boone, and he looks at the bear track. And on the upper part, you have the conclusion that there was a bear here. So anyway,
I heard Daniel Boone was a big man.
Was he? I heard he was kind of a jerk.
And a really big man was he.
That's right. Thank you for catching that.
Oh my, I missed it. Okay, the next
Daniel Boone was a man. Yes, a big man.
Okay, code values and syntax must be determined before the message can be encoded, transmitted, and decoded. Now there he starts to bleed the conclusion in, right? That basically somebody has to determine it. Well, as it turns out in life, life doesn't work unless the code is determined prior. Those amino acyl, the amino assholes, we call them, amino acyl tRNA synthetases have to be built into the genome, and it is for all life, in order for that code to be interpreted. So in that respect, P2 is okay. We can allow for premise P2. So P3, all codes require a translation mechanism adapter key. Yeah, okay, 3, that's fine. Biosemiotics, right? You see the bear track, we have an interpreter. He concludes that there was a bear here, that sort of thing. Now, another way to answer Immutable's question, you could look at it, is if you have a molecule at the surface of a cell, it will lock into a certain receptor, which is the first messenger. The molecule at the surface is called the first messenger, locks into the receptor, and then it kicks off something inside the cell that's called the second messenger. Okay, so in that way, the cell membrane, the protein that's going through the cell membrane that is locking on to the first message, is basically interpreting that message into the second messenger. So the second messenger is going to be the result. So again, we have that triangular relationship. So you can apply this to everything. You could apply it to a worm swimming up a gradient, toward a stronger, higher pH, right? or toward the smell of food, or some chemical sensing thing. So anyway, this code analogy can be applied to any damn thing in the world, even two rocks hitting each other. I'm sorry, John. He didn't like that one. But aminoacyl tRNA synthetase. Yeah, there are, like I showed the other day, there are about 50 of those. Those things determine the code, or they have a lot to do with determining the code. The tRNAs also determine the code. So there's like probably about 150 genes that determine what that code is in life. And so far we're okay for all the premises, right? So let's see. We can get to the next one. We're at 9:36, 9:42, 10. Okay. P4. Translation of encoded values does not transform. Okay, this one is bullshit. Did you look at this one, Beebsy?
Read it to me again.
Okay. Translation of encoded values does not transform one symbol into another. The representative symbols are interpreted to be equal. I don't even know what he's saying. I mean, they're equal? No, they aren't. The codon is not equal to the amino acid that it encodes for. I don't know what he's saying.
Equivocating on the word equal?
I think so. I'm not sure what he's doing. It's kind of sad, actually, that he put that premise in. And I think I asked him about it, and I never got a response to it. So, let's see. Okay. Anyway, that one is bullshit. I don't know why he put it in there. I don't even know why he needs it, and it doesn't have anything to do with the rest of his argument. Let's see. Where do we go to 5? Not sure if we see 5 in this run. My mouse is real slow, guys, so I'm kind of, yeah. Oh, shit.
It looks like Sinister is trying to get home so he can hop on here. And
okay.
Said, she said, "I do. Wait for me." I don't know what.
You've got an Speed. Have you got an email? Because I've got something that might actually help you with what you're trying to do there.
Yeah, I do. Hang on. So let me put it in here. Put it in private chat. Okay. My name is Mike Bruzenak, by the way, and that's mikebruzenak@gmail.com. I don't care who knows that. Anyway, let's see. So the genetic code contains all these factors. So yeah, it contains an adapter like we talked about. So yeah, it's a code, John. It's a code. Who cares? Okay, so now we're going to 1027. 1027. Nope, we got to go higher. Okay. So translation of encoded values does not. Okay, we got that. All of these requirements depend on foreknowledge of the intended outcome. Bullshit. What does he mean by that? What do you think of that one? Foreknowledge.
Well, I don't know that foreknowledge exists. All of these requirements depend on foreknowledge of the intended outcome.
Right. Foreknowledge. What kind of a being has knowledge? Human beings, raccoons, right?
Yeah.
Animals. Yeah. Does DNA or do the tRNAs have to have knowledge? No.
This is where I actually pointed out the aspect of the Enigma machine, because you won't have foreknowledge about what that message says until you actually run it through the system.
Okay.
It could just be gibberish.
Yeah. And for DNA, it's a little tighter than that. Basically, that's why there are different ways to look at codes, right? You could look at a code as a compression algorithm. You could look at code as a computer program. You can look at code as a cipher to hide information from people like with the Enigma machine. It just, I don't know. Foreknowledge, yeah, you don't have foreknowledge of every individual thing. But when it comes to life, basically, life sort of has foreknowledge of the next cell that it creates, because copy replication. There's a really interesting paper that John Maddox keeps putting up by Barbieri, 2017. It's called "What is Cell Biology" or "What is Code Biology," and it talks about all of these constraints and conservation and error, basically errors in replication, and it gets into it. And John cherry picks part of that paper, and then he leaves out the good part, which explains all the complexity of how DNA actually works and how this thing. Barbieri also has some theories about how the code developed, which he has in a number of other papers. He's a brilliant man. Unfortunately, he's 82 now, and he speaks mostly Italian. Otherwise, I'd try to get him on.
And
cool.
If you look in your email now, you should have a picture that should actually help you out of it for what you're trying to do.
Okay.
It's a bit clearer.
You sure you sent it to the right? Did I give you the right thing?
I sent it to that one. It's from Beamsy Boy 22.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not getting it yet. Oh, let's see here. My mouse is so slow. Mike.bruce@gmail.com.
Oh, what are you doing?
Not getting it. Do you want to share your screen? Can you? Or are you on a phone?
Oh, no, I'll see if I can actually share the screen.
It's fine.
I don't know which screen will be shared.
Calm down. Calm down.
Let's see.
Yeah, because I'm not getting it yet. I don't know why. Are you across the pond?
Across the lake.
Oh, the big lake?
The Pacific. I'm actually in Australia.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You're across the pond. Right.
You're announcing Sinister Porpoise. Watch me get the word porpoise wrong all night.
Hi.
Does that help?
Oh, hello. Good to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Let me do something.
We have Andrew.
All right.
Cool.
Can I interject for a second here and just tell you that, one, I actually do have a background in tech that's a little bit more in-depth than LPP's, but LPP, or Lil PP as kind of Gopher calls him.
I noticed that reading looking at your channel.
Has basically misunderstood something, and he's trying to I tried to very much avoid his entire problem, which is misunderstood the purpose of an analogy and metaphor, because I pointed out DNA is not a computer code, which he's trying to say it is, because it can't, basically DNA is not Turing complete.
Right.
It can't do Boolean operations. But he thinks because DNA computing exists, that means we can do DNA, that DNA can, and that's not what DNA is. DNA computing is just using the way DNA pairs to assign arbitrary values. I didn't argue with him using that word too much, but technically, when human-generated codes are not arbitrary, we have reasons to assign them to that value. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but for DNA, it is pretty much arbitrary, or the code. But then, as Barbieri, the guy who he always takes quotes from, explains to you, it's arbitrary, but there's a reason for that code to end up the way it did, and he explains how it developed, basically.
He also, and honestly,
optimal.
I don't really care for LPP because he's unpleasant, but
I'm
not an atheist.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and it doesn't have anything.
I'm a Celt.
You're a what?
A Celt, or in some pagan in some people's view.
I'm a philosophical Taoist, which I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I'm a secular atheist, a secular Buddhist atheist.
Which means, as a philosophical Taoist, I can be an atheist.
Yep.
We also have Nicola H in here.
And
we do. Where?
And did you go over?
Howdy.
Did you go over how I decided to? I'm sorry.
Go right ahead, Sinister. I'm sorry.
Did you go over how I decided to break this down and not just deal with the fact that his entire analogy falls apart because DNA on like computer code affects the real world?
No, we didn't go over that.
I don't know, because I didn't see his stream, nor do I care, but basically he has set up all these premises as one long and condition. So
okay, yeah.
I think you're doing the same thing I did. If any one of these premises is false, his entire argument is false.
Right.
And I think we're both at the same point, although I think I said it was 5 and it's 4, where I used some weird JavaScript analogy, which doesn't quite... I think what he's getting at, what he meant was, because we have to compile a lot of programming languages, or they have to be interpreted into machine languages at some point, that these languages are always going to be interpreted the same way, and that's just not true. That's going to depend on the machine.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello, Midnight Sparkle. And
Hello.
sorry, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I liked your JavaScript analogy with the triple equals and all that, but it I don't think it landed, but I did like that you brought it up. Because I'll bet John doesn't understand that one.
So why wouldn't it land? Because it have to be with somebody's knowledge of coding and computers.
Because it's not really addressing what he's talking about, and that's what I was getting at.
Well,
I don't. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Premise 4, John put that in there because John is John, and that's the way his brain does not work. So premise 4 doesn't have a damn thing to do with the argument at all. He didn't need it anyway.
But it's still false.
It's false because it's not equal. I mean, nothing when you're coding. Okay, if you have an arbitrary translation from one set to another, and that is your process of good. That's your function that encodes. Obviously, the source and the destination, or the range, the domain and the range are not equal. That's the whole fucking point of functions. That's the whole point of coding, right? You've got something different. So anyway, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why he said it. But I usually let him go on that one because I understand how his brain doesn't work. He has trouble with the English language a lot. So.
It's not even going to be interpreted the same way by every browser either. And if you study computer science and not just making some weird lie about having programmed for world leaders, which I've heard before, makes me think it's like, okay, you may in fact be a programmer, but you're lying to me because I've heard this lie before, and you're just trying to overstate your qualifications.
Well, if you look onto his homepage, he claims to have also studied quantum physics, and that automatically disqualifies him for any aspects of logic.
Like so many other people have. Yes, I also have. Everybody thinks they're their own expert in quantum mechanics.
As soon as you hear someone say logic and quantum mechanics, it's sort of right.
Yeah, and different.
I'm an expert in quantum mechanics. Prove me wrong.
And even different JavaScript interpreters are going to interpret things in different ways or translate them into different machine code.
Yeah.
I mean, there is such a thing as quantum logic, but it's like a relatively, I don't know, it's kind of still in its infancy stages from what I can recall. It's only like a decade or so years old.
But
it's related to the aspect of string theory.
Did he at least praise Gonna Go For Its animation he provided to me?
Yeah, I like Peter's animation. I think he created that. He may have created that for me. I'm not sure. I don't remember. That was before Peter got mad at me because I have Gur on my streams.
Oh, really? What happened between Gur and
Peter?
Peter.
I have no idea what Peter's problem is with Gur. It has something to do with him being on Praise's stream when they were saying vicious things about Amy Newman, and Gur just sat there and he didn't do anything.
Can you hear me?
They really have a hate boner for trannies.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is.
No, I think Peter's hate boner for Gur extends it extends beyond that. Yeah. I mean, I won't go into too many details, but it had something to do with a certain stream a couple of months ago. So.
Yeah, he had some bad people on, but I mean, he was like, his whole attitude is that I'm going to have people on that I disagree with, and that I find horrible, and he was showcasing it. And since then he backed down, and he even told Peter that he backed down and he wouldn't have those people on anymore. And Peter never forgave him. I don't know why.
Hi, Athena.
Anyway, all other known codes require intelligent agents to create these requirements. That's the part that gets it. That's where he put the.
Would that be a black swan fallacy anyway? Whether or not that's true or not. Yeah.
Yep. And doesn't he have a premise 8 too? I think.
It doesn't matter. I'm going to say after premise 4 was false, it didn't matter what the rest were.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
That's why I put that thing up on my screen, the picture I sent you. It's got all 8 premises nice and clear with his conclusion.
Yeah. Therefore, intelligent agency is required, It's just, damn, I am having a hell of a time with my cursor, guys.
Yeah, I sent you that picture as well to your email, so that way you've got that as well. If anyone wants it, I can send it to them. I just threw this together on Paint, so that way at least I had a clear picture rather than everything fading out every so often.
Yeah, here we go. All of these requirements depend on foreknowledge of the intended outcome. No. All other known codes require intelligent agents to create these requirements. All other known codes. And this is the equivocation that you were talking about. Did I call you Sinister?
That's fine. Sinister Porpoise.
Sinister. Okay. So this is the equivocation you were talking about. Basically, all other known codes. And it's like, yeah. Okay, life is obviously very different from anything else that we encounter in physics. Okay, it is very, very complex and very different and more nuanced than, just most things we find in physical chemistry and in any other field of science. Okay. And life is the one other place where we found a code that we have no intelligent designer for. No one here has ever seen God create these codes, these genetic codes, right? And that's why I don't believe that an intelligent agent created them, because I have no foreknowledge of a creator that can tinker with molecules to that extent that he could create life, right?
Yeah, I mean, my thing is like, for instance, when people talk about like the origin of life and how do you get certain things happening like DNA or ribose or stuff like that, it's like, well, I know chemical pathways that can generate those compounds, like with ribose and like compounds related to ribose, like the Carnazaro reaction will do it.
All right, but
the thing is, how does an intelligent agent being involved, like with that kind of process and that kind of setting, change the essentials of it? Like, how does it change how that process evolves?
Here's the problem you guys are having, and I understand why you're going there because it's your background. John Maddox is not basing this argument on biology.
Oh, I know.
Basing it here on equivocation, misunderstanding an analogy, and he's trying to use some ideas in informatics that I'm not sure I fully understand, but if we're going to define DNA as information, which we can, in informatics we can assign a code to it that is basically genes. But just because that can be a code in informatics, it does not mean it's a computer code. It's just the code that DNA uses to represent how it's going to create proteins.
I mean, you could simplify it further, is that it's just his own unique take on Jason Lyle's information argument, because if you ask John Maddox if this constitutes proof and that this is a deductive argument, he's adamant that this is actually a deductive argument.
Oh, and Icarus, Java and JavaScript are both bad languages, but for different reasons.
I'm kind of liking Python lately.
Oh, I love Python.
I never thought I would, but it has so many packages. It is so powerful.
You're also forgetting that you added a little dash of Behe into what is thinks as the irreducible complexity.
Well,
Jason Lyle borrows a lot from Michael Behe as well. They all sort of borrow ideas from one another. So if you read their papers, they just constantly are citing one another back and forth and not presenting anything novel.
Yeah, Behe's the top one because he's the one that actually did Darwin's black box. But yeah, everyone's got their hands down each other's pants.
Not to mention, the other thing he's doing here is we've all heard the Kalam Cosmological before. Repackaging it to use a different mechanism doesn't make it something different than the watchmaker argument.
Yeah.
Hey,
I mean, the essence is still the same, at least.
I'm having horrible trouble with my browsers. So I'm going to let you guys carry on while I fix that. I might have to bow out for a minute.
So
reboot.
So before I go, I mean, I really thought he wouldn't bother because he has a larger following than I do. And Mr. Maddox, just a tip here. If someone has a much smaller following than you do, the best thing you can do if they do a response video to you is ignore them.
Right, but you're forgetting that would be considering that LPP isn't a narcissist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every little challenge has to be met with, what do they call that? Where the reaction's not equal, it's greater, whatever. Asymmetry, I guess, asymmetric reaction. So he has to prove himself to be better and smarter.
It's not even a large response to what he says. It can be a very small thing.
Before you leave, Beebsy, I put a link to your channel in my description, and I linked your video in my description. And if you could grab my email out of private chat and send me an email so that I can invite you in the future, that would be cool.
Yeah, like I said, I sent you a copy of this picture that I've got up on the screen now, so you should have my email from that.
Yeah. And by the way, I've been a computer consultant for over 40 years. So I started with early micros and kind of came up in C, C++, Java, Ruby, Swift, iPhone development, and a whole bunch of other things. So I've been doing this for a while.
Next, you're going to tell me you've programmed in Turbo Pascal 5.5.
Actually, I think I did.
Pascal's a good language.
Yeah,
Icarus is trying to start a war.
Pascal was my second language, actually. I went from assembler to, basic, of course, to assembler to Pascal to C, and then C++, Java. And then I found Ruby, and I thought, oh my God, Ruby is heaven. I'm working on Haskell, too, here and there. So,
actually, Nick Saudi, one of the problems with P1 the way it's worded. Take out the word arbitrary, and it's true for all human-generated codes.
Well, that's me, actually. I was mostly focused on assigned, because assigned in LPP's mind denotes intention. So if you just challenge that no, it doesn't have to be assigned. You can say that values are imposed or values are inferred from it. He will have a shit fit.
Well, I have another problem where he says translation mechanisms. We didn't have a translation mechanism when Turing built the bomb to break the German codes at first. I mean, things like the ENIAC were just brute forcing the problem.
Yeah, that's actually when I had my discussion with LPP, one of the objections I had was he seems to be insisting that the code itself has to have a translation mechanism built into it without anyone else actually doing it in order for DNA to do what it does, to create the genetic code. And I said, okay, I guess we could ask what that translation mechanism is for Morse code.
What is the translation?
Morse code doesn't have a built-in translation mechanism.
Right.
It has to be interpreted by something apart from the code.
Well, P8 is also false.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Like the main thing that's false about this is that he does think it's a deductive argument, that this is actually a rock solid proof. and it's not. It's an
But if
argument
you
by
actually,
analogy.
if you also take it apart, he'll also then say, "Oh, it's just a hypothetical. You missed the point."
Does he ever clarify what the point of this argument is actually trying to, like, what he is trying to convey, or does he just keep getting
The
hitting that
inclusion,
rock in the hard place?
the
It's shifting
conclusion
the
is
goalposts.
the conclusion is on the right. So
He's trying to convince you that DNA was made by basically a deistic god. It's the same thing.
Oh,
as
sure.
Kalam Cosmological.
No, I understand that entirely, but it seems like when people respond to his argument in the way that they do, and they just don't grant his argument, he just oh, you don't understand the argument.
I thought I was granting
Well,
this argument.
It doesn't seem that LPP can bring himself to think, maybe I haven't explained this well enough, or maybe I'm just not communicating it well.
Atheist hyperliterous disorder.
Or maybe
Whatever
he
it's
just,
called.
maybe LPP, if you're watching this, maybe you just don't understand how Boolean logic works.
what the hell is naked HD XYZ? Here are girls. I think we should
You-
throw
Spam
him
Trying
out.
to flag the channel.
You would not be the
Oh.
first narcissist I've encountered on YouTube who can't do truth tables.
There's a second Steve McRae.
I was not going to mention that person's name.
It's okay.
Okay, so we want to ban this person. So remove, put user. Okay, yeah, remove. Hope I didn't remove Gur. Hopefully. Anyway, my goodness, still having browser problems, guys. Anyway, so this is just the same sad old argument. Stuff's complex. Life is something we don't totally understand. Therefore, some big, huge spirit kind of thing designed it. And a disembodied mind. And I am not an atheist because of biology. I'm an atheist because I don't believe in disembodied minds. And that's as simple as it is. So his argument doesn't land. Like when he's constantly saying, "Oh God, you atheists, you just don't get it." It's like, no, I do fucking get what you're saying. It's, it's complicated. It's a code. It's, life is complex and wonderful. But that doesn't lead me to believe that a God created it. I just don't go there.
Well, also,
And the thing is, oh god,
if he just takes out the false premises, he can still get to his conclusion.
Yeah. Well, who the hell? Okay, this is like a child's first logic argument, right? Where you create 8 premises, embed your conclusion in one of the premises, and then come to a conclusion. The last one is an inference. I mean, it's just a stupid argument. As logic goes, this is not a complicated argument. Like Sinister said, you just and all the premises together, and then you have an inference to the conclusion. The problem is that his inference has no power behind it. And
if he studied programming, he should know how these work.
yeah. Well, okay, so Maddox once, he was comparing, he said something about you're trying to decide between Python and Ruby on Rails. Now, in order to make that statement, that indicates that he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to programming. You would not compare Python to Ruby on Rails.
Ruby is the programming language. I haven't used Ruby on Rails, but as far as I understand it, it's just a series of commands.
Yeah, it's an API for doing basically back-end servers. That's what Ruby on Rails is. And Python is a programming language, and so is Ruby. So if he had said, trying to decide between Ruby and Python, I would have thought he knew what the hell he was talking about. But when he said Ruby on Rails and Python, I thought, okay, this dude he's never programmed a fucking thing in his life. I think he's a script kiddie that uses basically these web machines, to build web pages. And that's all he's ever done. I don't see any
at least he doesn't use tables.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably got as much knowledge of scripting and coding as I do, and my knowledge is very, very limited because I don't have much of a background in it. My interest is biology and the sciences, and that's where I approach it from.
LPP, if you go further in computer science, which I recommend because I said at my end of my video, there are some real problems that computer scientists need to solve right now, like the problems Google search algorithms are causing, as well as the anti-competitive nature of the SEO content algorithms. You're going to have to learn things like binary search trees, some discrete mathematics. You're probably going to have to learn higher level mathematics than I think you're capable of, like calculus. There's a reason why I went back to college at my age, LPP. And I don't think you're stupid. I was not being mean to you. Your argument
you were being nice.
Doesn't
It doesn't matter what you intend to say to him. If you think LPP is wrong for any given reason, he takes that as an assault to his masculinity.
Yeah.
Well, he has to have masculinity first.
Yeah, with
He thinks he does.
Little PP, it's sort of a bit difficult to take it that seriously.
All right.
He thinks he does, and that's the precious part.
I have more masculinity than he does, and I've been on HRT for how many years now? 9?
So, Beebsy, are you in school for biology, or are you working in biology?
No, I don't actually work at the moment. I'm actually a former serviceman that got injured, and I basically just spend my time either gaming or studying.
Okay.
Nice.
So I have another question about that. I have another question for those who know more about biology than I do. I have an interest in biology, but not enough to really cover it all that well. But is it just me, or are people like LPP trying to combine two fields where it's harder for people to be experts in more than one, and therefore if people can't take their argument down, they're saying it must be valid?
He's actually trying to combine 3 different fields to study. He takes some stuff from you guys in the aspect of coding. He takes some from communication science, and he takes some from the aspects of genealogy.
Well, I would say, I think informatics is actually a weird branch of, I think they call it library science, computer science. And I think that's what he's going at when you meant communication science.
Well, he's always talking about information theory and how it applies. And there's a whole bunch of new biologists like Barbieri and I can't think of the other ones. Whitney, is that his name? A whole bunch of people that are working on something called biosemiotics, which is kind of
Which for the life of me, I cannot understand.
Yeah, well, it's not. It's just a triangle. I mean, it's really, really simple to understand. What they're doing with it, it's not so easy to understand because
yeah, that's true.
I don't think they've actually done anything. Hubert Yockey is another one. Now, Yockey is a mathematician.
No, he's an information theorist and a physicist. He has actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've got him up on the screen right now. He is very, very good, and he's the one that actually pointed out that the aspects of the genetic code can be represented as a mathematical code, similar in aspects to the computer code, but not as a language code.
Yep.
And
So
he is an American physicist and an information theorist. That's where he's trying to drag his information from.
Yeah, and he has a book. What is the name of his book? I have it here somewhere. He wrote a book basically where he proved mathematically that we would never find out how life began. I believe it was, but he had a whole lot of other things in that book. Besides
That's this one, The Information Theory, Evolution, and the Origin of Life.
Oh.
Right, that's a good book.
I will actually put a link into the chat so you guys can actually read it if you want.
Yay!
Right, here's the thing.
It's a tough read.
LPP will probably say, we don't know, therefore God. It's just okay to say we don't know. There's a lot of possible routes for abiogenesis.
Yeah, that's the interesting part of abiogenesis. There's a ton of routes, but I mean, it seems like there's a lack of modeling that's going into
273 pages. Holy crap! That's a lot of pages.
It's an actual proper. It's a proper book, and it's an actual. You got 200 pages of actual reading, and then you've got about 100 pages of addendums and references. It's like I said, it's a tough read. For me, it's a lot more challenging because I don't have the background in computer sciences. For people like you, I think it will be a lot easier to understand.
Well, just because
No, you have a basis of an understanding of some of the things he's referencing, whereas I don't.
Well, I was going to say, if you get into the higher level computer science, it's a lot of math that I haven't had yet.
Math is awesome.
If you want something simpler to read that gives you a basic premises of what it is, this one's only 8 pages.
You got another one?
Yeah, but this one is
Dussel. Good to see you. Been a while.
This is Yockey actually responding to the authors of Pandas and People, where Little PP gets his quote mines from.
That's a surprise to nobody.
He actually quotes pandas and people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, let's see.
Wait, isn't that one of the the creation books that that was part of the whole, what was it? There was that whole
It's
lawsuit.
The Dover trial. Yeah, the
Yes.
Dover trial. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one.
This is
Wow.
Yeah. If you go into his review of me, from about 1 minute and 20, he starts referring to things like the origin of Earth and Shannon's theory of communications, and this is actually quote mined throughout his slides, which, as you can see on what I've got on the screen now. See how it has Hubert P. Lockey, and it's the exact same person who I linked and have just given you 2 different papers for. If you read those 2 pages, it will completely and utterly discredit his quote mines, because all he's doing is doing specific paragraphs out of context.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I had
that's fine.
this is a similar example. The green part is what John quote mines, basically. And then you read the rest of the paper, and there's a whole lot more that Barbieri is saying here. Basically, this is another quote mine part right here.
Wait, hold on. Go back to the green part.
Okay,
It's
back to the
creation.
green part.
Yeah, it's
Because there's
basically
even-
creation arguing 101.
But
If you can't win an argument, get the pickaxe and put a mining hat on.
But I'd like to point out part of the green part that still proves John Maddox wrong. More precisely, the genetic code has been accepted under the assumption that its rules were determined by chemistry and do not have the arbitrariness that is essential in any real code.
I think that he pushes back on that assumption later on. Let's see. But is essential and real code. The theoretical premise of this assumption is the belief that there cannot be arbitrary rules in nature. So yeah, he's saying that as what somebody else believes, not what Barbieri believes. So you got to be careful with that one. But he goes on to explain how this arbitrary code developed. And that's what the rest of the paper's about. And that's what his other papers are about.
And that's exactly what I was talking about Yockey in regards to he takes those paragraphs out of context and then uses that as evidence, and it's just
right. Yeah, he does it down here too, and I had a hell of a time finding the rest of this this purple part. I think
it's a headache actually finding everything that he does. It's just
it's because he left a few words out, and when you leave a few words out, it's hard to find the exact quote. So,
like I said, the quotes are actually from Of Pandas and People. If you actually go to the Of Pandas and People book, you can actually find those quotes word for word.
Oh, okay, that's why they're doing it.
Yes.
Yeah,
and that's why they're actually. If you compare the quotes he shows on his proof of evidence slideshow, and you look at the way that they're actually structured, and then you actually go to the paper where they're supposedly from, they're laid out completely different.
Yeah.
Which premise are we on now? Because there's still a couple others that were false after I stopped, because why did I need to continue after that point?
Or are we still...
What do you mean some of them were? I mean all of them are.
Well, if you just ignore the way he's worded them, some of them can be true if you assume that DNA is a human-generated code.
That's the part. Some of the things he says can be true under certain circumstances, or parts of it are true and other parts of it is just garbage. That's why he worded the premises the way he did.
But it doesn't help that it doesn't help that he wants to equivocate between the way code is used in informatics and the way computer code is understood.
That's where Yockey comes in, because like I said, he's the one that actually pointed out that there are similarities, but they're also different, and why it can actually be represented mathematically and not through language.
Got the Yockey paper here. That's Yockey 2000.
Even so, if John Maddox wants to tell me DNA is Turing complete, I'm just going to laugh at him.
Yeah.
It's, which one is this one? It's the Cambridge one from 2004.
Origin of Life on Earth and Shannon's Theory of Communication.
No, that one is 1992, if I remember, and that's not a paper. That's actually a. It's part of an article.
Okay.
All right.
So where's Yockey? Only have one Yockey. Huh?
Some unrelated questions. How long did Mr. Maddox take to respond to me? Please tell me it's not a 2-hour stream.
It's a 3 and
3 and something.
3 hours and 16 minutes.
For a 15-minute video.
He spent about an hour on you, I think.
It's a 15-minute.
And then he launches into this video where he explains binary code to people. And he's adamant that it's a binary code and that it's a digital code. And all of those, when you start looking at what they're doing with information theory in biology today, or what they're trying to do, you can say anything you want and try to and somehow make it stick. But putting your foot in the mud and saying it is this or it is that is not the way to go.
Well,
it's just not going to fucking work.
He likes to compare DNA to assembly language, which, honestly, if I were to use a language to make biological analogies, I would use an assembly language. Which one, it doesn't matter. They all have some very basic features that it takes a lot of lines in assembly language to do some really simple things.
Yeah, to answer your question from before, the one that he takes the quote lines is this one: Origins of Life on Earth and Shannon's Theory of Communication. It's from the journal Computers and Chemistry, volume 24 from the year 2000. And the abstract automatically proves him wrong. If you want, I'll link this into the chat as well, so that way you can have a read of the abstract. Sure. You need to log in if you want to actually have a read of the proper paper, and it's a pay-per-view, so just be careful with that.
Right. Sinister Porpoise, when you when you last spoke, you started out with assembly language, and for some reason my brain interpreted it assembly line, but you have LPP and I think Otangelo and others who talk about factories in the cell and assembly lines in the cell, and a factory needs a factory designer, therefore ID. It's like they try to force everything through the same template.
Well,
whether it be coding or the concept of assembly line.
Yeah, it's just the watchmaker. Or the Kalam Cosmological. It's not a new argument.
You could say certain things are like factories in the cell, like the ribosome or the spliceosome.
Yeah,
but
it's a simile or a metaphor or an analogy.
Not really.
You wouldn't say the spliceosome is like a factory?
No, not at all. No.
Really?
No, factories don't work by things bumping into each other.
Well, all right.
And it works by recognition of a certain element and then operating on it in a certain way.
There's a question in chat that I think I need to really work on not interrupting people. I apologize. That Andrew Kameen has that I think is an interesting one that I'd like to address. LPP has a script. He asks you ridiculously questions like, could 3D printer design itself? And then quickly shifts to an analogy with life. Well, the thing is, if a 3D printer had enough artificial intelligence to do design processes, yes, it could design itself. But there's another problem with trying to say that, and I don't know if LPP says this, but Ken Hovind does, that DNA is so complex that it means it had to have a designer. Clearly, the people who say this have never had a design course in their life. Because what's the number one principle of design? Keep it simple, stupid. So they're saying God is the worst engineer in the world.
Right.
Hey, you know what? If they want to say God is the worst engineer in the world, that's cool. He may exist, but he's not all powerful. Because if he was powerful, he could actually create a system that was simple. So I'm fine with God existing. That means he's stupid.
Well, if
I
they
mean,
can-
DNA itself is a fairly complex molecule. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I mean, even then, it can form very complicated, like higher order structures and form some interesting issues like G quadruplexes
oh, well,
that are interesting because Speed, you know what those are, right?
The G quadruplex, is that the 3 prime?
It's
the
essentially
3
it's a
prime
sequence
cap?
of DNA. So essentially, it's a sequence of DNA that tends to be very guanine rich. But what happens is the guanines undergo hydrogen bond with themselves, and it causes this very interesting kind of like distortion of the helix.
Is that okay? That's on the telomeres.
Yeah,
That's how the
it's usually in telomere
that's how the
sequences.
telomeres are protected. Yeah. I've looked at it, and then my mind shut off, and I decided not to know too much about it.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of similar to other like higher order structures that form like holiday junctions and things like that.
so
Yep.
I have a question. Did he challenge me to debate after I told him I wasn't going to bother with it?
I'm not. No, I don't think he did. He just just basically insulted you a lot, and then moved on, and then that was it. And he insulted your glove and your wand and your hats and just about everything. Basically everything.
I'm sorry you don't understand pageantry, John Maddox.
He was just he was just
Yeah, and it doesn't make an argument right or wrong, to call people names and make fun of their choices. So,
well, we're always giving him shit about his literally. So I guess fair play. I don't know. Literally a code. It's literally a code. It's literally John Maddox. Anyway, he's been going on with this argument for 2 years now, and he has no other argument that I've found that you can go after. There's nothing else. I mean, his entire content is based on these fucking 8 premises and that conclusion. And that's about it. Blows me away.
I mean, he's tried his hand at a moral argument before, but
oh, has he?
It's kind of basically you could summarize the whole thing as, well, if you're an atheist, then you don't have objective morality. And if morality isn't objective, then it's not objective. So, meh. That's pretty well it.
Right.
He's one of those people who fetishize the word objective to the point where it's like, if you just ask him, okay, it's not objective, so what? You just break their brain.
And then it falls apart when it starts talking about pagans like myself, or what were you, a Taoist, Porpoise?
Yeah, but you can be Taoist, and I'm more of an agnostic when it comes down to it. But if there are huge arguments whether agnostics are atheists, and I really don't care.
Yeah, I think that debate's honestly very stupid. I mean, the way I see it is just there's 2 senses in which atheism tends to be like understood. Like the first is the philosophical one. And technically, they're both philosophical. And that being kind of like an ontological position of no, God does not exist. But the other is more epistemic in whether or not we can know God exists. And typically, like people resort to saying, like we can't know that because that type of like the idea of God is unfalsifiable in nature. So that's why people hold to agnosticism. But I mean, I think its debate is like honestly pretty annoying.
If anyone wants a copy of that picture I've got up on the screen, I've just threw it into the chat. I just threw a link there so you can just get a copy of it if you want. So if you want to talk about Mad Dog, into private chat on the...
Okay. Yeah. I'll throw it in public chat.
Yeah, if you're welcome to use that and have it for whatever you want, because it's just so much easier than trying to go through his videos, because he fades up the top one while the bottom one's still coming in, and it's...
Yeah, I know.
It was a pain in the ass just to get it so it looked like that.
Aggravating. I put it in public chat, and I'll put it in the description.
Anyone's welcome to it, and I've got to make a move because I'm making pizza.
Oh.
All right. All of these requirements would depend on foreknowledge of the intended outcome. All other known codes require. That's only true for human-generated codes.
Yep.
I want to quickly welcome,
and that's
Jason.
where the analogy kind of breaks down.
Yeah.
Or if you're
Jason, how
trying
you
to
doing?
present an argument by analogy, where you're trying to say similar things have similar causes, and the whole point of the argument is, well, I'm going to propose this qualitatively unique mind as an explanation for it. Well, it's invalid no matter how it is that you slice it.
Yeah, I could have been a lot meaner to him. And there were parts of my script I left out just because I hadn't done this in a while. And
Yeah, John and I have had a pretty contentious relationship for quite a while. It all started when I asked him for the source of one of his claims. I asked him for the paper, and we went around and around, and eventually we ended up hating each other. But I mean, that's what it started over. I just wanted the fucking source because I couldn't find the paper because he had chopped the quote up so much I couldn't source it, you know.
tell you
And that blows me. Like yesterday, he didn't source your video. I don't believe he put a link to your video on his. I mean, if I'm taking down a video, I put the fucking link down, you know?
You would think.
I didn't do it in mine, but I'm really bad about remembering things like that.
Yeah.
But I did include all the video that actually mattered.
Yeah, you covered it pretty well.
But he's probably upset I didn't cover all of it.
Yeah. So this Barbieri paper that he cited last night is pretty interesting. There's a whole lot of interesting stuff. One of the things is, okay, have you ever heard of autopoiesis? Autopoietic systems? They're basically,
I have, but I forget what it means.
Okay, they're systems that create themselves and maintain themselves. So life is autopoietic, and it was invented by Maturana and Varela and Hofmeyr and Thompson. I forget what his first name is. Anyway, back in the 90s, and he came up with something that he calls codopoiesis, which is, let's see, the two complementary processes. One was the generation of new organic codes. Now, he makes the case that life is always modifying and mutating and exploring new sample space. And the other was the conservation of existing ones, like the DNA code, because we find that in all three kingdoms of life, archaea, prokaryotes, and eukaryotes. And so he makes the case that there's this tension between this generation of new codes, exploring new sample space, and conserving the things that work. And he's got a paper on it. I thought it was pretty interesting. And it's obvious that John didn't go any further on this because this guy talks a lot about how that code developed, how that DNA code developed, and why it had to develop the way it did. Pretty interesting. And there are just a ton of papers about how that code naturally developed. They're homing in on the statistics of the process, and it's very interesting. This paper has a number of good clues that will help you understand how a code can develop through natural processes, which surprises me that John is the one that put it up on his site, right?
Well,
I don't think creationists ever read entire papers, for one thing.
Or understand.
I mean, it's obvious to me that John hasn't read quite a few papers that he's put on his folder for annoying people, so to speak.
There's a name for this. It's called a Trojan source. When the creationist puts up a source and cherry picks it, and then 3 paragraphs later it refutes him.
Did you make up that term, or is that already?
No, that came from it came from somebody on our channel. Was it Chris Peacock or was it Icarus? One of those guys.
All right.
I'm gonna have to tell you who, or no, it actually came from Rationality Rules. I think is where he said it came from. Call it a Trojan source. You remember Otangelo came with that paper that?
Oh yeah.
Well, if Otangelo has anything along this lines, I'd love to see it. Because I remember him creating his Discord server with absolutely everyone as a moderator.
Oh, really?
Or isn't it a man?
Oh, no.
And that went as well as you'd expect. People were changing the channel names.
Otangelo is special.
You don't say.
We have a special place for Otangelo on this channel.
Anyway, it's also... Sorry, I want to just bring up something here.
Go ahead.
John, if you don't understand scientific papers, and personally I don't like them because I have a background with journalism and I want to beat these writers with the elements of style, so I find them hard to read, it's all right. But you can find other sources that are pretty good that back up your points that people can read. If you're just trying to say this paper disproves you without having read it, people are going to point out that you're wrong. Because, John, there are people who are smarter than you are.
Pish posh. Yeah. Nobody is smarter than than John Maddox. He's the king of our generation. I don't know. I'm just fucking around.
How dare you point out that there are people who know more than John about things in biology? Like, for instance, that ribose is not a protein.
I wasn't even talking about biology.
Yeah.
I was talking about computer science.
Well, that makes two things.
So there's a new deal in artificial intelligence called transforms.
Oh, I'm gonna look that one up.
Yeah, something that I think who the hell's working on it? Amazon, I think. My son was telling me about it, but it's kind of a new way to something that other than neural nets for basically doing image recognition and a few other things. I think it was transforms. Yeah. I just started. My son just brought it to me the other day.
I don't think it's just Amazon that's doing that. I think Google's working on it too.
Probably. Well, if Amazon's doing something, Google's doing it. You can be sure.
It may be. I mean, AI has gone away from trying to fool people into thinking computers are human. Mostly, it's trying to do specific tasks.
Yeah.
And the Turing test has become more philosophical. And John Maddox, if you want to, I don't know, go on Randolph. If you want to have a discussion between us, I will just suggest Randolph Richardson and Godless Engineer moderate it. And
he does not like Godless Engineer.
I don't care.
John does not like Godless Engineer.
Because I don't want this to happen.
Yeah.
Godless Engineers, I don't know what problem you have because Godless Engineer is a great guy. And we can have the discussion. But you're going to have to agree to certain rules.
Yeah, what I caution you not to do is to go onto his channel because you will be overtalked, you'll be put in the back room, you'll be shouted down, you'll be treated badly. But I'd be willing to host a John Maddox versus somebody. I had a debate with him, a year and a half ago, and it went really badly because I'm a horrible debater for one thing. But he asked me if information was physical, and I told him it was, and he freaked the hell out, and he couldn't get over it. It was an amazing little exchange on Standing for Truth's channel.
Technically, sorry, why were you saying it was physical? Was that just to annoy him?
No. I believe that basically you can interpret information as being entirely physical. That we look at information and we have analogies and we can do math on information. We can do all the things that humans do, but it boils down to that there is stuff or there is stuff not next to it.
Yeah,
so when you look at information, what you're looking at, information cannot exist without a medium. Do you agree with that?
I'm going to disagree there because
I disagree with that too.
Because information is an abstraction of what something may mean. The representations may be physical.
I'm not a realist when it comes to abstractions. I believe that abstractions can be hashed out with in terms of what humans are doing or what neuroscience or with neuroscience, basically. So I reduce everything to the physical.
On the other hand, I'm also a smartass, and if you just told it to annoy John Maddox, I would be cool with that.
Yeah, well, I did it partially to annoy him.
So, you are annoying.
Partially?
Yeah.
You think it's just partial speed?
So, what are we ending? What are we doing?
Midnight? No, we're kicking you out, Midnight. That's what we're doing.
Good.
I could ask the second question.
What's that?
No.
What's the deal with Perry Marshall? All of a sudden,
Oh, fuck.
do you want to
Perry
explain
Marshall and
that
Dennis
issue?
Noble. Perry Marshall is a God. He's a real strong Christian, right? And he's an engineer. And he went off and he did this $10 million challenge. And he hooked up with Dennis Noble and the Royal Society. And Perry Marshall is also an amazing salesman. And he sells, I think he runs a really successful consulting business where he goes into businesses and basically, I think he does marketing and a bunch of other shit. But anyway, he came up with all this bullshit and he wrote this book, Evolution 2.0, in which he makes very, very bad arguments. I mean, it's just it's just an amateur piece of trash. And then he wrote a paper that John is going to be going over on the 22nd, I think, 22nd or 23rd, to talk about that paper. But anyway, Perry Marshall is a con man, basically. And he's making money. He's making money on all this.
Oh,
Has he been well received by like other people, like in the Origin of Life community, or?
In the Origin of Life community, yes, because he's not so much because he won't admit to intelligent design, even though that's all he's really talking about. But his whole thing is that cells have cognition, that they're intelligent, right? That they have this intelligence, and he believes that cognition came before life.
well,
So anyway, he's talking about God.
I could agree with that. I mean, that's the weird
What?
thing. Like, I could agree with that in some sense, but I mean, the way cognition to be referred to is like completely different from its normal sense.
yeah, it would be more
Yeah.
like the decisions my robotic vacuum cleaner makes.
Yeah.
And I think those are actually, I want to say, well, they're not necessarily more complex, but they're more involved than what a cell might do, because a lot of what's going on in the cell is just because of chemistry.
Well, you can say the cognitive nature of the universe or of chemistry or of carbon chemistry created life and created
really weird
human
thing-
cognition.
We're all God living out the creation.
The really weird thing about that argument, though, too, is like saying it's just chemistry is life has this interesting property that it's able to regulate its own like internal chemistry with respect to its environment, which normally
is-
chemical systems don't do. Normally, they just behave
Right,
in whatever
but you can
equilibrium
make-
condition they're in.
Right, but you can make the argument that the only reason it's doing that is because it's responding through chemicals in the outside environment. For example, when you're outside, when you're outside and it's cold, right? You feel, you feel the air, you feel the wind on your skin. You know what I mean? Once you feel that wind in your body, you're gonna have all these, all these weird chemical reactions happen.
Yeah,
Like-
I mean, the thing is, though, too, like, one thing you would expect, though, is that, like, okay, there might be some weird things that happen early on, but that system, like, should reach equilibrium eventually. But life doesn't do that, right? Life does this weird little maneuver where it's managed to replicate itself, and, certain variations of life appear that are better than the original one, and are able to, kind of, in a way, extract energy from the environment more efficiently than its predecessors were. And that's why life is able to keep going on and on.
Yeah, but what do you mean by putting the word just in there when you say it's just chemistry? What do you mean by just chemistry? Are you saying it's what? Tell
What
me.
am I meaning by it?
What do you mean by just chemistry? Why not say it's chemistry? Why
Wasn't I
would
the
you
one?
say just
Well, because
chemistry?
all the processes in the cell are reducible to chemical reactions.
Okay, reducible. So you're being highly reductive when you say just. You're trying to reduce it to what rules with orbitals, maybe a
Sure.
little carbon chemistry. Okay, that's not what's happening in the universe. Okay, what's happening in the universe, look at what's happening on Earth. Look at how carbon is arranged. Look how much carbon there is. Look what is next door to every carbon atom. Okay,
Yeah.
you can't reduce that. You can't reduce the entire Earth to a couple rules about chemistry. So when you're saying just chemistry, you're automatically strawmanning what life is.
Well, let's take that argument like into perspective, right? I mean, like one of the most common forms that carbon exists in is methane. The other form is CO2, and occasionally, like it forms like very complicated structures with silica.
Well,
So I mean, in those forms, though, carbon, like speaking as a, the chemistry that carbon existed in that state is relatively inert. I mean, it will react under certain conditions, but it's not. It's a type of chemistry that's very hard to get it to react in terms of like chemistry that carbon has when it's in ketones or when it's in like let's say carboxylic acids or other things happening.
like I just want to say something really quick. Speed. You said you can't reduce life to a few chemical laws. Is that what you said?
Right.
Those very same chemical laws, and by extension physical laws, they're quote unquote simple, but in their simplicity, they gave rise to life and everything else. Remember the game of life?
Yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
you could in principle. Okay, in principle, you could reduce the entirety of what's happening into the Earth. And on the Earth, you could reduce it to descriptions of what is happening on the Earth, right? Where everything is, in principle. But can you imagine in practice were you to do that?
Well, I mean, I think in some sense that's the goal of the origin of life, right? It's to understand in terms of the most fundamental aspects, that being a mixture of chemistry, physics, and geochemistry, and geologic processes. How do we go from something which has no, inherent tendency to form these very complicated, these very complicated and intricate self-sustaining chemical systems, right? How do you go from there's a kind of a weird like phase transition or kind of some weird process that accounts for how those things arise.
I do want to respond. Oh, go ahead.
ahead.
I wanted to respond to something CRISPR said that you're highlighting, but go ahead.
Yeah.
I guess finish.
Oh, I want to see what you're going to say first.
CRISPR agrees with me that basically abstractions don't exist.
Well, that's put it back, and that's what I wanted to. That's what I wanted to respond to. If you put it back,
I don't know where it is. Oh, here we go. Don't actually exist.
Okay. Well, I may be wrong. Here. Maybe this is the wrong way of looking at it. But because abstractions exist within your mind, you know what I mean. They're part of your mind. You could say that they actually exist within the universe. They just exist in your mind. Because
in
your
that
mind
respect,
is part.
yes.
Yeah, because your mind is part of the universe.
Yep, in that
You know what
respect, I agree. In that respect, but so immutable. So the thing is, what you just said about we have to find out how life happened from those simple principles. Basically, is what you're saying. Okay, no, because that isn't how it happened. Okay. There was
Well, what do you think? Let's imagine we're in a place like where the universe is, or not the universe, the Earth is just forming, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's a point in time where it cools down, which takes about 400 million years, and like the earliest fossil evidence, like we have of microbes existing, depending on like how accurate the dating is being done, is around 3.8 to 4.2 billion years ago. So in a relatively quick amount of time, relative to the Earth cooling down, you have, this hellscape of Earth, and then you get, very primitive life like prokaryotes forming out of it. And in the very like primitive Earth, during the Hadean period at least, you had a lot of molten rock, you had a lot of carbon dioxide, you have a lot of compounds that are fairly inert. But after 200 million years, 400 million years, give or take, you have this process where now there's life, which occupies a very, very different type of chemistry.
Well, going back to the earlier point and what I wanted Christopher C.A. and I was saying, which I think I have a slightly different take than I think was Midnight Sparkle was actually taking, although it's similar. Abstractions do exist, but they have no physical reality. A lot of things we run our society on, like money, actually are abstractions. Money does not have a physical reality.
I mean, it does in the sense that it
Well,
does in the sense of fiat paper or or silver or whatever the hell, like what I mean. There are physical ways of representing money.
But the paper and the silver is not the money. Those are just representations of money.
Yeah, so you could say it has a physical representation.
Humans get confused by their abstractions.
Yeah, abstractions do exist, but they have no physical reality.
It's good to see Demeter in the side chat as well as Dessel. I'd wish they come in here, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Things like double linked lists and single linked lists, which are used in computer science, we don't even have representations of those. They're just data structures we use to make things like stacks, and I forget what we use double linked list for. I know stacks are single linked lists. Oh, double linked lists are used for things like playlists.
I think you and I should talk about programming one of these days.
Well, maybe we can get LPPB on, and maybe we can get Godless Engineer to come on with us.
I'd rather not have I'd rather not have PP. I mean, sorry, LPP.
If he came in here and he came in here calm, we could have a conversation. But I've never known him to come in calm. He always comes in like hot.
Wait, you don't spend.
Good luck getting that to happen.
You don't intend to spend the entire time mocking him?
No.
Imagine.
No, I'd kind of like to have a conversation with him if that were possible without him resorting to, you're an idiot. You don't see my point.
Well, you guys control the mute button.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, that's why he doesn't come in. I had him in one time over a little discussion about red flag laws and the Second Amendment. So
I think the interesting thing about like Demeter's comment is I agree with that entirely. But when you think about it, there's a lot of systems that can occupy that as well. Like there's peptide RNA models, there's lipid RNA molecules, there's lipid RNA models. There's all sorts of things you can envision that kind of display that general behavior.
The thing I'm trying to explain to you, Immutable, is that you're not going to come up with some law about RNA or about carbon or about any of that stuff that is going to show you the path to life. The way you're going to come up with the path to life is to know historically which molecule was next to to all the other molecules. So you're going to have to know where all the molecules are on the Earth. There is no straight on path to life. It is going to have historical. It's going to have some historical contingency to it. Right?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
Okay, if that were correct, though, right? I mean, the thing is, say that we're correct, we should see like life brimming with all sorts of different, like molecular functions in terms of DNA, in terms of like the storage capacity it uses, in terms of DNA, in terms of the biomolecules it uses. We don't see that, though, right? We see very clearly where life uses. Except for viruses, at least, right? It uses the genetic material of DNA. It uses RNA. It uses lipids, which more or less are the same. There's variants within prokaryotes and archaea. But all life also uses the same amino acids.
Oh, please take the graph away. I'm taking calculus. I have nightmares about graphs right now.
Okay,
There's modifications. There's modifications to those amino acids, but the basic amino acids, the 20 that are used, are conserved.
Okay, that's you're looking at what happened after 1 billion years. Okay, after 1 billion years, all of that chemistry settled down, and we ended up with L amino acids, and we ended up with the D sugars, and we ended up with the membranes and the nucleic acids that we had that basically had gotten chosen. from that entire mess, right? But prior to that, and that's why I think abiogenesis is going to have to look to that wider, to that more chaotic, more stochastic beginning, okay? Because I don't think it was that simple in the beginning. I think there was a mix of chiral amino acids and different nucleotides, and I think there were probably 150 amino acids that were floating around. And out of those, initially, only about 12 of them got selected, or maybe even 6 of them. And then it was 12, and then it was 20. But then eventually life settled down into this path, into this constraint, or this funnel. And it ended up, it settled into the funnel, and then it blew out of the funnel in terms of macro complexity. But the micro complexity had become a settled matter at some point. At some point, that particular formula took over. And now, when I say that it was historical and it was contingent, I'm not saying that it was improbable. I think it was highly statistically probable that these pathways developed, but which pathway it took could have been different. And that's why I believe that when we find aliens, we're not going to be able to share dinner with them. They're going to have different amino acids. They're going to be slightly different.
Maybe. I mean, I think the thing is, like, if you look at the chemical structure of the amino acids, they're not very complex. I mean, there's aromatic groups, there's hydroxyl groups, there's carboxylic acids.
What isn't complex?
The amino acids themselves, right? They're not the most convoluted chemical species. Like the chemical species, like with amino acids, aren't the most convoluted thing in the world. But that also makes sense from a synthetic point of view. You don't need many reactions to get those types of simple functional groups on those molecules. And if you wanted to get amino acids like with more chain diversity and more diversity with functional groups, well, that would take a more convoluted synthetic route for that to occur.
But you don't need them because there are 10 nonpolars, there are 5 polars, there are 3 basics and 2 acidics. And it ends up being 10, 5, 5. And that is the magical statistical path that it took, because that's all you need. You don't even need that many. We certainly don't need all these nonpolars. I think we needed proline. Okay, but
I think we definitely needed proline as well. I mean, it's a very critical.
Well, we need cysteine too because of the sulfur, right? Because of the
disulfide bridges.
Cysteine bond. So I mean, there's this limited Lego set basically that we have, and it ended up paring down to that limited set, and that's where complexity took off. So, like I say, it went down into a funnel, became decided upon, for these basic biochemicals, and that caused complexity to blow up. So the funnel now expands. So it's like a little bottleneck there. Anyways,
it's kind of weird that methionine exists as an amino acid, because it's basically cysteine with a methyl group attached.
Yeah, and I wonder what good it does.
I'm curious about that as well, because I'm pretty sure it doesn't form disulfide bridges because the sulfur group isn't free.
But what the hell does it? What does it do?
Okay, listen up, nerds. This is about computer science.
Okay,
no, I don't care.
Wait a minute. Computer science is a nerdy concept. Okay, Dessel.
I wasn't a nerd.
Dessel is trying to come in, but his devices are not connected, so I can't let him in the room. So I don't know if you can hear me, Dessel. Something is wrong.
Hey, a call for an uprising is still around.
I don't know. Anyway,
it's interesting how hundreds of potentially different amino acids life only managed or somehow managed to base itself on just 20 or so.
That's precisely. Yeah, and that's kind of the interesting thing, right? Like, the amount of amino acids that exist are well in the hundreds, yet our biological systems utilize exactly 20. And like I was saying earlier, chemically speaking, they're not complicated. They're not simple necessarily, but they're not like the most complicated compounds you could think about in terms of synthesis or in terms of complexity they have.
I don't know about you, but that screams universal common ancestry to me.
Oh, and Icarus.
Yeah.
Double linked lists
Out of many things.
can indeed be used for stacks, but normally you just use singly linked lists. Unless you need the extra functionality of the doubly linked
Is he
list.
talking about? Oh my God, malloc. I hated malloc. Oh my God.
Well, to be fair, doing memory manipulation directly, like C forces you to do, does avoid a lot of problems with garbage collection.
Right. What I used to like about C is I could put a pointer to my return address, and I could fuck up my fellow programmers by running a function that fucked that return address up. And when they returned from my function, anything could happen.
Well, I think what a lot of systems programming is going to go over to Rust, which actually does do garbage collection, but they avoid a lot of the problems that garbage collection causes by the way the language is designed. Like, it's very weird that, to me, that Rust has constants in a language where variables are immutable unless you tell the compiler that you can change their values.
I don't know anything about Rust at all. What kind of a beast is it?
It has all the pain in the ass syntax of C combined with all the pain in the ass syntax of JavaScript.
Wow.
You don't like C, do you?
I like JavaScript ES6 a lot.
No, I was talking about the Sinister. You don't like C.
I actually love C. It's just the syntax can be a pain in the ass.
Well, I mean, yeah, but at the same time, it's better to use that. I know, Steve, there are sometimes we're forgetting a semicolon that will literally destroy you.
I made a mistake. I meant C++.
Oh, well, then C++ is better.
C++ is where C went bad.
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
Well, the first version of it was okay, but anyway, we're going to lose all of our non-programming.
How many people are here for biology?
Yeah, we can either talk about biology or programs. They've got to split into two streams.
Well, the problem is, this is coming from someone who actually tried to combine the two in a way they don't necessarily. Because there's an analogy where one is kind of like the other.
Yeah.
Wait, how did you try to mix the two?
Read the book.
What book?
I was referring to LPP.
On Rust.
Oh, never mind.
Sorry, my mistake. This whole stream started because he doesn't understand that.
If I may go back to the subject of the genetic code, at least in general, and I'd like to hear anyone's thoughts on this in particular, immutable.
Why?
When I pose...
Never
Shut
mind,
up.
a joke. No, fuck you, Immutable. Go ahead, then, True, sorry.
So when I pose the near universal genetic code to creationists, they often respond with that God or the designer programmed it in there because it had to, I guess, manifest itself according to the unique environment of the Earth, or like because the Earth was one whole environment and that affected. I guess I don't know if you've come across that argument yourself, but I'd like to.
So God is limited by the Earth in terms of what he can and cannot create. Okay, that's just fantastic.
Really?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That's so you're limiting God by forcing him to operate on a planet that he created, but.
Well, I think the argument is that I guess there's one environment on the Earth, and God had to create the same genetic code for that environment, otherwise it wouldn't work.
I don't know about that. I mean,
seem a
there's
bit limited, yeah.
CRISPR.
That's you need some justification for that because there's nitrogenous bases that are very similar to the to the nucleotides we have now. How synthetically feasible you can get those to form is one matter. But I mean, in principle, it shouldn't be too bad necessarily, like to interchange one for the other and have the same process work.
Yeah, my dog's coming in loud, by the way. I'll mute
Gonna get
myself.
him. I've got raccoons out here beating on my window, and I've got dogs in the neighborhood. I don't know. It's a zoo. It's a fucking zoo here.
Have your raccoons started to form a riot?
Oh my god, I haven't fed them yet. The only thing we don't have is John Maddox busting down our doors. Yeah,
it's just beautiful. I love when he insults people and just
Yeah, I've got a few good ones from him. For some reason, I can't run OBS tonight. I'm gonna have to reboot my computer or something, so I can't do anything.
Did he even? So I don't know.
Oh my god, Rust has a let statement. Okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
That's really, I hate that in JavaScript.
Yeah.
I also hate the double equal sign in JavaScript, in case you haven't noticed. But
Yep. Or the triple?
I'm sorry, the triple equals.
Yeah, the triple equals, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, Python has it, Perl has it, the Bash scripting language has it, PowerShell probably has it. It exists for languages that aren't strongly typed.
I'm a Python newbie. I've been doing it for about 2 years, but I still don't feel like I'm good at it. So I don't know.
Well, just remember to keep things indented, but I wanted to say CRISPR. The thing is, you can be interested in computer science and biology. You're just probably not going to be experts in both. And you could be a YouTuber who wants to present himself as an expert in both when you're an expert in neither, and you're a moronic apologist.
My God, this naked something or another's what the fuck?
Oh, he's back.
Just ban.
Yeah. Wow.
Ban him.
I mean, what the fuck is the point? You know?
I'm gonna look that up, Icarus. I'm pretty sure it does.
What kind of sites have you been going to, Andrew, that have brought this bot to our domain?
Yeah, what the hell?
I'm betting it's LPP.
It might be LPP. Yeah. Jeez. But I don't really see the point of what he's posting. I don't know. It's like, I don't get it. Anyway.
I've seen it across YouTube.
Yeah. So Dessel.
All right. That does not have the triple equals. It has something similar.
The acknowledgement of...
Have you looked into Barbieri's Codices or whatever the hell? Codices?
Codices?
No, I saw you mention it before, but I haven't read that myself.
Yeah, codopoiesis. Pretty interesting.
That article you linked me to the other day was pretty good.
Which one was that? I forgot.
They were talking about like the emergence. Hey, I think I beat you in raccoons tonight. There's
Really?
2 that are right in front of me right now. Yep.
Wow.
Anyway, it's the latest one that you linked me to. They were talking about activating functionalized protocells and like their organization.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of biology that is not computer science, CRISPR. There's a lot more to computer science than just
Oh my God,
I guess the only comment I had so far was you were talking about stochastic ways to get to life. And I read this, there's a recent article, Brownian ratchets, stochasticity and disequilibrium produces order. And so like the thing that they were stressing there is that it uses both. So you're using stochastic methods and statistics, but you're also using non-equilibrium thermodynamics, dissipative systems. And that's what drives the order. But there are a bunch of statistical processes involved, like probably with the genetic code, like in terms of the division of lipids that contain RNA sequences, the reshuffling of sequence content in the lipid networks. That might be a statistical phenomenon. Or another paper that I read talking about using ornithine, which statistically transitions into arginine, and arginine's binding capacity for the production of things like RNA. So there are both processes at work there. There's statistics, there's stochasticity, but the other really important element is the disequilibrium that produces the order.
Yep. What did you say? What did you say leads to arginine?
Arginine?
You said something before arginine. What was that? Compound?
Ornithine.
Ornithine. Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Arginine plays big in the stuff that Demeter and I are doing, actually. Which is
that guy. There's that researcher De Herrera, and when he did his stuff on like nano-confined adenosine monophosphate producing RNA, he also checked out what arginine did, and he said the binding capacity was increased significantly. So it's an important one, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that you said about the Brownian ratchet, that's something that Daniel Nicholson was talking about with, those little walkers on microtubules that carry the globules. There's a Brownian ratchet theory about how those work. Do you remember that?
I don't, but it actually reminds me. There's a point that that Maddox made that I thought was a good point. Because Nicholson was arguing against understanding. Yeah. So you can, I don't know, beat me with a stick later or something. But because I know we're all supposed to be here to. Yeah. But he was pointing out, like Nicholson was arguing, when you think of mechanical devices or manufacturing, you think of a mechanistic and deterministic process. So like, understanding it in technological terms might not work very well because of the stochasticity involved. But John responded back, well, there's a lot of technology that's using frontline science that's involved in statistical processes. So you don't really need a determinism at work there in order to produce technology. You could use those methods and produce technology as well, which I thought was a decent point, a good rejoinder to Nicholson.
Yeah, but Nicholson's point was that if you overthink the machine analogy, you're going to miss a whole lot of things like the Brownian ratchet as being, a possible mechanism for microtubules. And that was his point. It wasn't that it isn't. I mean, we necessarily have to think about these biochemical pathways as networks, right? But if we write down a network and we don't look deeper into it, look into the statistics or look into the stochastic nature of it, we're going to miss things. It's kind of what Nicholson's point is, that we can't look at it as a machine because it isn't a fucking machine. Machines work differently. Machines have gears, and when the gears don't mesh right, the machine breaks, right? With biochemicals, if it doesn't mesh right, another pathway takes over. There's basically genetic buffering.
It's going to kind of come down to semantics there about specifically what is meant by machine. Yeah, right. And so I don't really have a problem with that kind of terminology. I'm willing to be open to people who are really trying to insist that using that kind of language to understand biology is insufficient and problematic in various ways. And I'm totally open to hearing those arguments. But for me, with respect to, I've seen many scientists use machine kind of vocabulary to describe biology. And I don't really have too much of a problem with that if we're understanding machine in a looser sense of the word, where we're talking about the function that this does and that it's used to produce work and so on. And I just think that nature has its own bottom-up processes that are responsible for creating those things, just as we have our own top-down process of rationally applying our minds to produce similar kinds of things with our own machines.
Yeah, and I think that's the way biologists, by and large, are using the term. I mean,
yeah,
I think most biologists, especially, they have a fairly significant, I don't know, not aversion, but kind of reservations about referring to things as being literal codes when it comes to genetics or stuff like that.
I mean, it's like you can read about the cell for years and years and years, and then one night when you're sitting down or laying down, and you start imagining what is really going on in the cell, and you realize that water is more like pudding or jello, and you realize what the protein density in a cell, that sort of thing, and you start to look at the reality of what's going on, and that's kind of what Nicholson is saying, is that we don't want to get so caught up in our metaphors that we forget to consider the reality of what's actually going on at the cellular level.
To some extent, though, you have to ignore it to a certain effect, because otherwise,
to understand, and that we use reduction as a tool. Reduction is not the reality.
So, Speed, I don't know if you saw the chat, but I came across an interesting article that I think you really should read.
You did.
Like now, it's information. It's information. The fifth state of matter. There's one physicist says there's one way to find out. We were talking about information before, so you know what I mean. I figured, why not?
Did you link it in the public chat?
No, I'm actually about to do that now. Give me a minute. I'm sending it to myself.
I'll take a look.
And then I did text it to you though, so check your phone.
Oh,
but I will post it in the chat.
Oh, I got it. Don't worry.
Wait, if you're looking at chat, he's back.
God
yeah, I know.
Damn,
and
dude, get a fucking life.
Satisfy your wishes on. Does he have a link or some fucking thing? I mean, what is the deal here?
Let's not go there.
I don't understand what his point is. Why is he doing it? Oh, you're supposed to
He
look
wants
that
to get our
up in
channel
Google?
flagged.
Oh, okay. He's an asshole. He's just going to keep coming back with socks, you know?
Yeah.
Not much we can do with him.
But yeah, Speed, check that out.
Okay, I will.
Well, I mean, you should do that now, considering it's one of the topics we're doing.
Yeah, I'm losing energy, guys.
Time to shoot in the head.
I'm going to have to shoot her in the head. Let's see. Okay, should we quit for the night? I've kind of lost it.
I suppose.
I can't even think anymore. Okay, we can go in the back room for a while. And Sinister, did you send me an email, or are you going to, or do you want to? But let's end, and we'll talk back room. Where's the brand? Okay.
Oh, David's not here.
David.
Oh, David P.
Oh yeah, David.
Anyway, we're done for the night. Goodbye, cruel world.